our guest speaker today, Reverend Chris Holton Jablonski. Chris is a lifelong UU who grew up in the Framingham Church. He has served churches in Berkeley, California, and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. He's very excited to return to the UUMH and is very honored to be celebrating Easter here with us. And now join us in
the spirit of prayer and meditation. I invite you to sink into your pews a little bit, allow your breath to deepen and your body to quiet. We'll hold silence together in just a few moments, but first these words from the Reverend Gretchen Haley. Give up the fight for some other moment, some other life than here and now. Give up the longing for some other world, the wishing for other choices to make, other songs to sing, other countries, other bodies, other ages. Purge the past, forgive the future, for each come too soon. Surrender only to this life, this day, this hour, not because it does not constantly break your heart, but because it also beckons with beauty, startles with delight, if only we keep waking up. Here, we remember ourselves, all a part of it all, giving thanks, centering joy. Let us hold silence together. Anybody who wants to hear this story from a little bit closer up, you could be maybe childlike in age or in spirit or in temperament, whatever you like. Plenty of space down around here. Come on in. All right. Plus, you get to suss out the competition for the egg hunt this way. So, once upon a time, there were 3 fluffy yellow baby chicks. And they were very, very beautiful and very fluffy, but they weren't only fluffy and beautiful, they also happened to be ninja masters. And not just ninja masters, they were also magically in control of elemental forces. And they had been together fighting crime and ensuring justice in their kingdom for a long time, and they decided to call themselves Earth, Wind, and Fire. And so it was that Earth, Wind, and Fire, the magical ninja baby chicks, kept peace and justice in their community for quite a while. But as there are in almost every community, and certainly in every story, there were some malevolent forces. One in particular, a woodchuck, very crafty woodchuck, who had big plans for the coming season. Her name was Kudchuck. And Kudchuck, the woodchuck, decided that it wasn't just enough for her to ruin people's gardens. She decided to organize all of her woodchuck friends and family, and they made an unholy alliance with the deer. And so in the coming season, woodchuck would stride on the top of deer, and together, little teams of woodchuck riding deer would decimate every single garden in the entire kingdom. But they knew that one thing stood in their way, and that was Earth, Wind, and Fire. And so Kudchuck hatched a plot to divide and separate and conquer Earth, Wind, and Fire. And so it was that one day, after their preparations, after all of their wonderful practicing, Earth, Wind, and Fire were having a little bit of water, relaxing, when all of a sudden 3 sparrows flew from different directions. And they all said, Earth, Wind, and Fire, Earth, Wind, and Fire, there's an emergency. We have a bunny who's caught. We have a baby chick who's caught. We have an egg who's caught. And so they decided, which they don't usually do, they decided that they would separate and go in 3 different directions. Because it sounded like pretty easy search and rescue missions, pretty straightforward stuff. And so it was that Earth went to the south, And earth followed the sparrow, and then the sparrow disappeared when the sparrow pointed out that there was this little yellow floating baby chick. It looked like it was just on top of some kind of mud maybe, but nothing too complicated. And so earth flew down and went out into the mud, but as he got closer to the mud, he realized that the mud wasn't brown. It was sort of purple and sort of glittery. And as soon as he stepped his tiny little talons onto it, he realized it wasn't mud at all, but it was slime. It was the kind of slime that you make from your recipes on YouTube, and it was slime that just sort of slowly sucked him in. And usually he could call on the elemental strength of the earth, but this was not remotely natural, this slime, and it started to pull him in, and he saw as he got closer that it wasn't actually baby chick at all, it was a peep. It was a little marshmallow, strange, not an animal, didn't need saving. And he knew that it was Kudchuk that was in charge of it, but he couldn't do anything about it because the purple glittery slime sucked him even farther in until it was almost right up to the top of his little powerful ninja chick beak. Not too far away, wind had been sucked into another direction and had followed, and the little sparrow had pointed into a cave. And wind flew down towards the cave, and he could see dimly a little white rabbit off towards the back of the cave, and he flew in thinking that he could save him. But as he got closer, he realized that it wasn't a white rabbit at all, that it was actually a chocolate bunny. And it wasn't even chocolate, it's a conversation for later, but it was a white chocolate bunny. And so he felt betrayed on so many levels, and he went to go try and pull him free when he turned around, and a huge stone had been rolled in front of the cave, and all the air was gone. And wind had no air to pull from, no elemental power, and it was dark. And he knew that he was trapped. And in the opposite direction, off to the north, fire flew, following the sparrow, and the sparrow pointed out into the middle of the lake, kind of a chilly feeling lake, but in the middle of the lake there seemed like there was just a little bit of an island kind of bobbing, strangely, with an egg in the middle, with two little feet sticking out. Seemed like a chick trying to hatch, flitting around, and so he flew out to it and landed, but as soon as the little feet landed on the island, he realized it wasn't an island at all, it was ice, it was cold ice. And he sort of sunk deep into it, and the ice was cloying and grabbing and climbing, moving all the way up, and he realized it wasn't an egg at all. It was an Easter egg, a little plastic Easter egg with two little sticks sticking out, and he was covered in ice, and he couldn't summon the fire at all, and he was stuck. And so it was that Kudchuk, the woodchuck, with her powerful magic, appeared in all three places at once. And she said, "This season, we will control the entire kingdom. This season, you stand no chance, earth, wind, and fire," when all of a sudden, and we'll get back to that in just a little bit. So why don't we go back to our seats, and we'll join in the next little bits of worship. Asked the choir to sing it, and I'm so glad they did. It came to me the way songs sometimes do at just the right time. I was facing one of those hard times. I was stretched to the breaking, and then it kept getting worse. Broken down and tired. I had moments of ease, moments of calm and peace, but they were surrounded by so much challenge. And then I heard that song. It was as we were preparing for worship, someone had found it and was going to sing it in a service, and I heard her practicing in the sanctuary, and I just sat down in the back and just wept. I rise up in spite of the ache. I rise up knowing precisely just how hard this all is, knowing precisely just how little I have left in the tank. I rise up. And I wanted to share this song and this message today on Easter because it is one of the things that I most appreciate about Jesus. Some of our churches will say this morning that Jesus rose from the dead. Christos Anesti, the Russian Orthodox will cry out this morning, Jesus is risen. Indeed, he is risen. And the resurrection, the bodily resurrection, is a fascinating thing. And one of the beautiful things about Unitarian Universalism is that there might be some here who believe in the resurrection. We are on a free and personal quest for truth and meaning here, and it is possible that someone has found themselves there, believing in the resurrection in this way. Most Unitarian Universalists don't land there, but that's neither here nor there for this morning. Because this Easter, I want to lift up another kind of rising. Something that I think is even more miraculous on some level. That Jesus rose up every morning and got back to work. That Jesus, tired and bedraggled against all odds, rose up again and again and did the work before him. Because remember, he was a homeless, itinerant preacher and teacher, and that is not easy. But he had pieced together a small, sometimes unruly band of followers that all needed to be fed and supported, and that is not easy. But even more so, his teachings had put him in danger. Rome had identified him as a rabble-rouser and a threat. He knew that he was in danger of being put to death. But still, he persisted. In the face of all this, still he rose up. Day after day, week after week, he was not daunted. He was not silenced. He did the work before him. He served. And this, to me, is the miracle. This, to me, is the teaching, is the call before us, especially now. To persist in spite of the odds. To not lose hope. To not be daunted or cowed. Even though the odds are against us, even though the fight is uphill and downwind, we rise up in spite of the entropy which would seduce us into silence and marginalization, in spite of the fear of risk and exposure, in spite of all of the voices within and around us, we rise up and we sing praises of love in this world which is so quick to hatred and fear. We rise up and we sing praises of connection in this world which is so quick to isolation and loneliness. We rise up and we work to serve this world, to save this world, to make this world more just and more loving, more peaceful and more kind. We rise up like Jesus, like all the masters, like all the teachers. We rise up and we get to work. Amen. And funnily enough, now you can rise. On down. Join me around here-ishly. Perfect. So, as the astute worshiper will remember, when we last left earth, wind, and fire, fire was encased in ice. Wind was deep in a dark cave. And earth was up to his beak in purple glittery goo. And the woodchuck, Kudchuck, had just appeared to all of them, threatening, and had cast a magic haze around their heads. She said, fear, fear and doubt, fear and doubt. And sure enough, swirling around each of their heads was this green sort of fog. And try as they might to shake it off, it got worse. And the fear grew within them, and the doubt grew within them, and Kudchuck disappeared. And Earth tried as he could to shake it off, flicking his head back and forth, feeling the purple glittery goo consume him, when all of a sudden, he saw just at the very edge of his sight, he saw this beautiful crocus, a kind of kamikaze, powerful flower, first flower just bursting up out of the frozen dead earth, singing spring with his brilliant white and purpley petals. And he remembered earth remembered, and he could see and feel this connection. He knew that it was springtime, and he focused all of his energy and all of his intention on that tiny little flower, and sure enough, it started fueling him, and he felt the magic, felt the power of the earth returning to his little tiny chicken ninja body, and it started burst out. All of the purple goo and the glitter shot out in every direction, and he knew instinctively, he said, I have to find my friends. And so he scampered very quickly. And on his way, fire was there, and fire was encased in this ice, and trying as she might to move through the haze of the fear and the doubt. And oddly enough, fire had this image of Jesus, and now fire wasn't exactly religious. Fire wasn't exactly even a Christmas, Easter kind of person. She was sort of religious-ish. Like, she would go every once in a great while, but she remembered. She remembered the story of Jesus. She remembered the circumstances of Jesus, and she thought, if he could do that, if he could persist, if he could rise up and have all of those teachings, all that stacked against him, and all of a sudden that fire lit a fire within her heart, and sure enough, the ice shattered in all directions, and just then earth was flying over the edge, and she said, earth! And he said, fire! And they knew they had to find wind. And they could feel where wind was, and so they flew towards him, and the stone was enormous, blocking this cave. And they were on the outside, and wind had gotten very despondent on the inside of that cave. The fear was overwhelming him, the doubt was overwhelming him, but then all of a sudden, he heard the voices of his friends. He heard the voices of his friends on the other side. He felt that connection. He felt all of that community and all of that love. And all of a sudden, wind said, back up! And he felt the tiny bits of air that were left inside the cave, and with one huge gust of wind blew the stone wide off, and luckily, earth and fire had gotten out of the way because that thing flew right past them. And they said, we know what we need to do, and so they did. They flew, all three of them. They found Woodchuck, and they surrounded the Woodchuck, and she stared around in fear. She knew that it was over. But the nice thing was they put a lot of energy into her rehabilitation. And she decided that she would organize, because all of this good organizing had been done for nefarious purposes, but they had connected the woodchuck and the deer community, and they decided they would create enormous community gardens just for woodchuck and deer, and they would pilfer each other's gardens, but consensually. And it was a beautiful beginning. And we tell you that story because it's quite like that with all of us. There is this power. There's this power which we're reminded of this time of year, this power which comes from being connected to the cycles of the earth, being awake and aware, and this power which comes from remembering and sinking into the stories of all of our teachers, but even more so, this power which is right here, in this room right now, this power which comes from hearing one another's voices and remembering that we're not alone, and remembering that together, this day and always, all things are possible. Amen. We will